Hello and welcome to Business Today. I am Siddharth Zarabi and you're watching Easynomics. This is our made for YouTube special uh, chat that I do with you, mostly alone, sometimes with guests, on economic issues and matters that concern you and your financial well being and your savings, your entire balance sheet as far as you as a person are concerned. And as we know, economics sometimes seems like a difficult subject, but we try and make it easy for you. I've been away covering the World Economic Forum at Davos, and for the past few days, I've not been able to meet up with all of you, but I'm sure you will like, subscribe, and continue to share your comments with us on what we offer you here on Business Today and Easynomics. The topic that I have for you today on Easynomics is a topic that concerns all of you, and this is something that we have spoken about in the past as well. And this is to do with the monster of inflation. Inflation, price rise, mehengai, and if you were to use even more Shuddh Hindi word, mudrasfiti, this is something that all of you experience. And all of you, me included, react and respond to in a different way. But the numbers that I want to share with you on Easynomics today are numbers that will shock you. Over the past several months, a lot of us have been responding, commenting, and criticizing the oil marketing companies for continuously raising prices. Petrol and diesel prices went up. The government has recently decided cut excise to reduce the rise in price. The daily changes in price has been stopped once again, the second time in the past 10 or 12 months. And all of this is one of the steps that the government of India has taken to control inflation. Yet, inflation in India is near 8%. But if 8% is worrying you, the consumer, if it is worrying policymakers, if it is worrying the government, just imagine what is happening in the rest of the world. And today I'm going to share some numbers with you, which will tell you why the situation as far as inflation is concerned is unprecedented. It is never before, at least in the past 4 or 5 decades, after the oil shock in the 70s, this kind of situation, many of us have not seen in our lifetime globally. I repeat, India is still better off relatively than the rest of the world. And why am I saying this? Let me give you some numbers. The latest number that has come today is of inflation for the month of May in Turkey. Now, whether you call it Turkey or Turkey as the name change for that country, but inflation is definitely a huge problem. In the month of May, Turkey has recorded inflation of 73.5%. And while there are countries like Venezuela and Sudan, for Venezuela, the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, has projected an inflation rate of 500%. For Sudan, 245%. For Zimbabwe, 87%. For even Argentina at 52%. For Yemen at 60%. Turkey's numbers are very, very significant, and I would say far more serious than Venezuela, which many people say is a basket case as far as its economy is concerned. This is because Turkey, and I don't know how many of you have ever seen it on a map, on the globe, or even traveled to Turkey. It's a beautiful place. It has old history. Uh, it is seen as a link between Asia and Europe. And people of Turkey consider themselves Europeans. And it was and still remains as a very advanced sort of uh, uh, way of life in comparison to many other countries. It's European, at least in design and the way in which people conduct themselves, and it all has to do with the sort of policies put in place by the founder of modern Turkey. But now, in the current administration under Erdogan, uh, Turkey is suffering from a very, very high inflation. And interest rates there are also very, very high. And for a country that prides itself as being European and as being a bridge between Asia and Europe, to have this kind of inflation, economy that was significantly dependent on tourism. It has some amount of exports, and is an economy that is fairly well managed. It's not Africa or a Latin American economy where sometimes modern principles of economic administration have also been found wanting. This is Turkey. Now, look at other countries, including the United States. The United States number that I have is 8.3%. The European Union, or what is called the Euro area, is 8.1%. Spain within that, which has been in a depressed state of sorts as far as its economy is concerned, and is considered as one of the weakest economies in the European Union. Spain has 8.7%. UK is 9%. The United Kingdom is 9%. Um, Netherlands is 9.6. Brazil is over 12%. Russia is over 17, almost close to 18%. And like I told you, India is closer to 8%, in fact, still below 8%. China is 2.1. And within these numbers, the reason I'm throwing so many numbers at you, it sometimes becomes too much to absorb or digest. I'll just request you to hang in there as I give you one more set of numbers, and then try and explain why and what is likely to happen as a consequence of this. Within the European Union, energy price inflation is near about 39%, unprecedented. A lot of people, economic analysts, experts, have not seen this kind of rise after the oil shock of the 70s. Food inflation in European Union is 7.5%. As again, I would say those who have traveled to the European Union and traveled to the United States know that food is relatively far more expensive in the European Union versus the United States. That's for a variety of reasons. In the US, energy inflation is about 30%, food price inflation is about 9%. In India, energy inflation is about 11%, and food inflation is about 8%. In Germany, energy inflation is about 35%, food inflation is about 11%. In the UK, uh, energy inflation is about 54%. Now, what does this all mean? Why have I shared so many numbers with you? Uh, these numbers should tell you about the seriousness of the problem. And this problem has emanated in a short time. That is another reason why this is the biggest headline in the world, really, outside of politics that we sometimes see. Because 2 years of the COVID pandemic, no one had expected the COVID pandemic to come in. Then we saw some relief, and then we saw uh, economies come back on track, manufacturing capacity start getting utilized, consumer spending started to happen, and then suddenly, bam, Russia decides to invade Ukraine. Very few people had expected it. In economics, there is a term called a black swan event, which means that while swans, those beautiful birds, are white, you rarely get to see a black one. And that is the black swan event. You can always Google and search up what it means specifically. But a black swan event, a unprecedented, very rare occurrence in terms of Russia's war uh, on Ukraine, has unleashed what Jamie Dimon, just to get that pronunciation right, who is a celebrated banker, investment banker in the United States, has said. He's basically said that his forecast for the economy, the American economy, is that he's upgrading his forecast from a storm to a hurricane. And he says that inflation and the interest rate hikes by the US Federal Reserve are a perfect storm for the US economy. And that is why several analysts are predicting a recession in America. Now, a recession in America uh, is something that will again raise a lot of eyebrows. In the last 14-15 years after the 2008 financial meltdown, America has had deep economic problems, and the governments there have then responded very, very aggressively to prevent a collapse. In 2008, the global financial meltdown was followed by practically, several $100 billion, perhaps even about a trillion and a half, being pumped in under various schemes to rescue the American economy. And then we saw a phase after COVID. Once again, uh, America decided to open its purse strings and pump in a lot of liquidity, lot of money into the system, handing cash into the hands of its people, because that's the American style of capitalism. It is the way they deal with economic issues. There is a crisis, they throw money at it, they get out of it till the next crisis. But the American economy's performance is a matter of concern, both good and bad, for the rest of the world. It is said that if American economy sneezes, the rest of the world catches a big cold. China is also a big factor, but like I told you, the numbers from China clearly show that inflation there is not a problem. In fact, they have been tightening down, clamping down on several areas, including Shanghai, which is one of their most important economic centers, in this pursuit of this strategy called zero COVID. And there are experts who say that it doesn't make sense. Some of those restrictions have been relaxed, but that's not the topic for today. So there is now an expectation and a view from several experts that America could slip into a recession by next year. And that would have significant consequences, because it would mean that if American growth goes down, that means American consumers are spending less, they are borrowing less. Demand for goods and services from the rest of the world into the largest economy in the world will go down. And remember, China is an export oriented economy. The US is one of the largest or the largest consumption economy in the world. Its consumers determine the fate of millions of workers across textile mills, food processing, you name it, in the rest of the world, including India. So, if America is going to slip into a recession, which I'm sure the government there will try and prevent, but indicators right now suggest that is going to happen. And one of the indicators is that in the United States, it is said that whenever inflation goes above 4%, and unemployment rate also goes above 4%, and they have very good inflation and employment data, amongst the best in the world. Their reporting systems for this data are very, very robust. In fact, I would say they are the benchmark. And because of the nature of the American economy, its homogeneous nature, it is it is said that once these two benchmarks are breached, that is a red flag that a recession will happen in 2 years afterwards, within 2 years after this. And it's very clear that with these two being breached, a 4% plus rate of inflation and a 4% plus rate of unemployment, that warning signal is flashing red. And there are other markers, market markers, bond yields, consumer sentiment, which is also in a very sort of it's in an area of concern. So what Jamie said and what a lot of other economists and experts are saying, that an early winter is likely to set in on the global economy, and that would have consequences. And this early winter is happening due to a mix of factors. If the 2008 financial meltdown came from the excesses of American corporations and their very bad, very bad unregulated lending practices, this current bout is coming from a multiplicity of factors, including incredible, never before amounts of money, liquidity that was pumped in America and other economies to come out of the COVID lockdown, which caused excess money supply. And whenever there is excess money supply, it inflates prices because there is more money chasing a limited set of goods and services. And then we had Russia's invasion of Ukraine and what that has meant for global energy prices. And this time, this inflation is far more concerning than in the past because it is being accompanied by food price inflation. And food price inflation, as we know, is the worst kind of hit on poor people across the globe and in countries like India, because a large part of the income, wages of poor people or those who are under have enjoy lesser monthly incomes, that goes into food because food is survival. And if food prices go up to the extent that I have told you, it's a very big hit. It becomes a socio-political hit as well for even those countries which are facing this. So this time's inflation is accompanied by food price inflation and a food security and supply issue that is happening because individual countries are trying their best to prevent things falling out of control. Indonesia banned palm oil exports. India has clamped down on wheat exports for an indefinite period of time. Sunflower oil, of which we used to import more than $1 billion from Ukraine, that supply has got very significantly disrupted because of the situation in Ukraine. So Russia controls 1/5 of Ukraine right now in terms of its land. But the impact of the Russian Ukraine fallout is like it is spread like wildfire across the world. While the armed conflict is in that particular land area, the economic fallout is all across the world. So, for a world that was still coming out of the COVID pandemic, where there were individual difficulties for various countries, where money supply had been stretched too far, where there was this massive amount of liquidity chasing all manner of assets and inflating asset prices in pretty much every sector. Now reality is setting in, that reality could be a harsh one. And that is why I say that this early winter that is setting on the global economy is going to cause cold, not just sneezes. It is going to give a lot of people very difficult colds to deal with. And the challenge for India also, which has a tremendous amount of social welfare needs for a very large section of its population, that challenge will be huge. The government has already responded, and I'm sure more steps will be forthcoming in the days, weeks, and months ahead. But if you wanted mid 2022 a headline for this summer is a summer of inflation across the world, of a kind, of a nature that the world and the present generation living in it has rarely ever seen. And this will require concerted, calibrated efforts across the world because, unfortunately, with the linkages that we enjoy, which have delivered us economic prosperity, those same linkages, unfortunately, will work against a lot of people. So, if Russia is to blame for what is happening in Ukraine, the consequences are going to be felt by all of us, and that is why uh, inflation is something that is currently moving out of economic textbooks into our mainstream daily life, just as climate change has as well. But we leave that for some other time. On this episode of Easynomics, we've tried to explain this matter at some length. I'll be back with more next week. Do write in. Tell us if you liked what we said. And if there are any suggestions or topics that you would like us to address, we'll be very happy to do that in the future. Till then, goodbye. Have a good weekend and watch those interest rates and watch the impact of inflation on your savings. I wish you all the very best. Goodbye.
If you like the video, do like, comment, share and subscribe.